Here we are. Last week was a little bit of a disaster, but all good. Things seem to find a way and work themselves out. Um, so welcome to another episode of Sunday Story Time with Romper. I only did 2 chapters last week, and they were pretty short, but the plan is to knock through, a good chunk of this book today. We're gonna have a good time. So I've never done this before, but let's start off with prayer. Dear movie gods, thank you for blessing us with the sequel to Men in Black. Without you, it would not be possible to have this amazing novelization. It's just so wonderful and just incites so much joy in so many people. Oh, movie gods, continue making sequels to movies that are awesome. Just continue so that we can enjoy these amazing novelizations and we can enjoy the amazing movies. I don't know which one's better yet. Book's pretty good. So, well, in your name we pray. Amen. All right, ladies and gentlemen. So, I hope you get yourself back up to speed. Kay has joined the force again, and he's not quite deneuralized yet, but, he's ready to take back his duties and take up his place back here at MIB and get back to saving the planet. So let me get another little taste of this delicious peppermint tea, as suggested by my friend Julie. She suggested it would help my voice, so thank you, Julie. All right. It's very loud when I put it down too. But without further ado, Men in Black 2. Chapter 10. Within the agency, its official name was the Tech Unit, one of the many glass-walled rooms off the main hall of the Men in Black headquarters. It was the land where dreams came true for every overgrown kid who'd ever enjoyed a fireworks display, or ownership of an air rifle, or the results you got when you lit a cherry bomb and flushed it down the toilet at school. Yes, this was the MIB's storehouse for all kinds of exciting alien technologies, strange machines, bizarre devices, and of course, weapons, whose outrageous firepower couldn't even begin to be determined just by looking at them. Jay called it the toy store. This was the place to come when you had to save the planet, and you needed some heavy-duty persuasion to use on anyone who might disagree with you. When you were dealing with creatures who could laugh off Mr. Smith and Mr. Wesson as easily as if they were Mr. Laurel and Mr. Hardy, this was the place to get whatever it might take to swing the winning argument over to your side. Jay still remembered the first time he'd seen the alien weapons back in Jeeb's pawn shop. Initially, he'd been dazzled, but that didn't last. His amazement faded quickly, as did the little voice in his head that kept insisting that he saw the impossible. Both reactions had been extinguished by an intense desire to get his hands on the goods and see what those babies could do. Later, Kay took him to the next level, where he brought him into Men in Black headquarters and showed him what the tech unit had to offer. Jeeb's pawn shop simply couldn't compete. It was like the difference between some kid peering through the toy maker's window and that same kid being let loose with an American Gold Express card inside an FAO Schwartz. Now, the toy store wasn't even so much as a memory for Kay. It was Jay's job to bring him up to speed. The tables were turned, and those tables were loaded down with some mighty fascinating stuff. It was the first time Jay had seen the light of interest in Kay's eyes since they left Truro. Tech Unit, Jay said, introducing Kay to his surroundings. The most advanced technologies from all over the universe are kept in this room. Even though he still went all kid at Christmas time whenever he came into this place, he felt constrained to act as if the wonders surrounding them were strictly ho-hum. For some reason, he didn't fully understand more than anything else. He wanted Kay to think he was Cool. Kay wandered over to a machine that displayed a glowing holographic globe in its center. "What's this?" he asked, casually poking a finger at it. His fingertip penetrated the holographic ocean, making one tiny little ripple. Jay glanced over, not really paying attention, still playing it cool. "Don't touch that," he said automatically. It was good advice. A shame it came too late for Jarithia 5, a nice little world some 50 million light years away from Earth. On that fateful day, life there was going on pretty much as usual. The populace was coming and going, having their little squabbles and their great conflicts, their loves and their hates, their equivalent of the boxers versus briefs debate. Suddenly, without a single sign of warning, the heavens seemed to open up before their startled eyes, and a huge, pinkish thing emerged from the dome of the sky. The Jarithians had no words in their own language to describe such an apparition, although "yikes" came close. Later, witnesses did attempt to describe it as almost like a fish stick, only much more evil. Time slowed the way it always seems to do in times of unfathomable crisis, as the unidentified fish stick-like object slowly descended and plunged into the waters of their ocean. Its impact caused a gigantic tidal wave to rear up out of the depths and advance with unstoppable force onto the coast. Panic-stricken Jarothians stood shocked. Stood shocked and dumbstruck, staring as the oncoming deadly waters cast a shadow of doom over the glowing spires, lush parks, and bustling streets of their entire city. Then the full horror of their situation hit them, and they stampeded, shrieked pitifully in their own tongue, "All is lost! All is lost!" Back on Earth, Jay inspected the holographic globe critically. "Nothing happened," Kay said. For once, he sounded less like a hard-boiled hero, and more like a little boy caught playing with his daddy's belt sander and mom's best china teapot. "Hands in your pockets," Jay directed, looking severe. Inside, he was grinning like a fool, recalling the damage he himself had wrought the first time Kay brought him in there. He'd done more or less the same dumb thing, touching stuff he shouldn't have been touching, sending it like a harmless little ball toy on a high-speed ricochet course of destruction through headquarters. "Bet I don't look like such a big chump now, huh?" he gloated. "Now we're even." He opened a metal cabinet, reached in, and grabbed one of the largest, most complex, most intimidating bits of weaponry ever seen on planet Earth. Series 4 deatomizer, he told Kay. Almost instinctively, Kay reached for the gun, only to have Jay hand him something smaller. Much smaller, and about as ominous to the eye as a 49-cent water pistol. It didn't even have a recognizable barrel, as such, but instead threatened the world at large with what looked like an overgrown mosquito snout. Placed side by side with his dinky implement of destruction, the dainty pearl-handed derringer that had once been the defensive weapon of choice for discerning dance hall gals would have acquired delusions of grandeur. It was called something unpronounceable by the extraterrestrials who had built it, so it was known around the agency as a noisy cricket. Cricket was accurate, if all you focused on was the size of the thing, but given the kick it could dish out, noisy was one hell of an understatement. "Your signature weapon," Jay said, handing it to Kay. Kay accepted it, only to hold the one petite weapon disdainfully between thumb and forefinger as if it were a kitten that had done the naughties on the Aubusson carpet. "Isn't the size that counts," Jay tried to mollify him. "It's what you do with it." "Signature weapon," Kay repeated, not convinced. Jay turned on the charm. "Would your superior officer lie to you?" "I took orders from you." Kay sounded doubtful, cynical, and incredulous, all in equal portions. "Taught you everything you know, sport." Jay flashed him a smile. So it wasn't the truth. Big deal. It was private payback for the way Kay's return had turned Jay invisible out there in the main hall. It was petty, sure, but it was harmless, and damn, it felt good. "Could we get on with this?" Kay said testily. "Not in that Cub Scout uniform," Jay replied, giving Kay's Postal Service garb another once-over. "Be good to see you back in the suit, Kay," he thought as he looked at Kay's knees. "Be even better once we get you deneuralized." Aloud, he said, "Come on." A large share of the main hall at Men in Black headquarters is devoted to the Immigration Center. It's not all that much different from its administrative sisters, those customs areas found in all major international airports, border crossings, or nautical ports of call. Here, all the incoming aliens went through the same rigmarole as any Earthling, whether traveling for business, on a pleasure trip, seeking political asylum, or simply desiring to better their lot in the land of world of opportunity. Fuck it. The arrivals area was by no means a bleak, echoing warehouse for the mass processing of immigrants. Along the lines of Ellis Island, times changed, even if your bureaucracy doesn't. The needs of Earth's newest arrivals weren't to be ignored, be those needs food, clothing, or a snazzy new cell phone. The side of the hall opposite the actual processing station supported a Burger King, a Sprint store, a duty-free store, and an iHeart New York shop. What the hell, they figured. Might as well get the newcomers accustomed to the wonderful world of consumerism. Besides, some of the incoming aliens were traveling with children in tow. It's universally acknowledged truth that you can best persuade a whiny youngster to shut up and sit still if you give him something to eat or play with. Whether visiting Earth for the most casual of reasons or the highest of ideals, one thing was a constant. Pick a line, stand there quietly, and wait your turn. Oh, and pray that who or whatever standing in line behind you isn't A, a predator, B, impatient, and or C, getting hungry. Of course, if possibility C seems both probable and imminent, it is the best to have the critter ahead of you in line hold your place while you went off to buy everyone a round of Whoppers, extra cheese. The agents who staffed the customs area were the unsung grunts of the Men in Black, the dutiful, diligent data crunchers of the team. If they were lucky, things went more or less according to standard operating procedure. Call for the next creature in line. Ask him, her, it, them a few questions. Check the accompanying documents, passport, work visa, the whole 9 yards, and process them. These agent-listened creatures, who looked like the love child of David Bowie and a giant parakeet, complained that their ID pictures made them look positively feline. They assured the distraught immigrant that even though the ATM machine had eaten their card, it couldn't have been worse. It could have been worse. The guy who repairs the machine could have eaten her. They mended fences and put out brush fires. In time, they collected their retirement benefits. They didn't worry about the fact they didn't have any thrilling tales to bring home to the spouse and kids, because they didn't have any spouse or kids. And if they managed to scrape together a family after they were mustered out of the agency, no problem. Neuralized retirees didn't need stories to tell. On this particular day, the line of immigrants and tourists was moving along nicely when a sultry female in black leather reached the head of the queue and was waved up to the counter. She looked Earth normal, though a nitpicker would insist on categorizing her as Earth normal gorgeous. She even looked fetching with her mouth full of hamburger. The longer the custom lines got, the better the business at Burger King. She was accompanied by a scruffy person or persons who might also be categorized as humanoid, though Earth human was out of the question until he managed to pick one head and stick with it. The agent behind the counter hardly bothered to look up when the little group presented himself before him. He had gone through the same routine 100 times already today, and he'd go through it 100 times more. At the outside, before it was quitting time, he was supposed to have a coffee break and a lunch break, but someone had screwed up and forgotten to send in his relief. He supposed it was just as well because the same administrative screw-up had also neglected to send him off on a bathroom break. Name and planet of origin, he asked mechanically. The lady swallowed a mouthful of sandwich and fixed him in a penetrating stare. Selena Zath, she said, her voice smokier than one of those legendary back rooms on the 6th day of the week-long political convention. Planet Yon, Kylothian system. The agent duly entered this information on the computer terminal. Selena's seductive tones were having no more effect on him than her smoldering eyes. Regulations for the Men in Black specifically forbade fraternizing with off-worlders, so either this immigration agent was loyal and true to his company training, or else his job in the bureaucratic netherworld had wrung all the natural human reactions out of him. Any fruits or vegetables? He asked. Yes, Selena replied, enjoying herself despite her inability to ensnare the agent with her feminine wiles. 2 heads of cabbage. She indicated Scrad and Charlie. The joke didn't register on the overworked agent. He heard of a million of them. What the hell was it with some aliens? The minute they set foot on Earth, they decided they were Jerry Seinfeld. Reason for visit? Education, Serlina purred, turning the heat up a notch. I want to learn how to become an underwear model. The agent looked up at last. Now this sounded interesting. I'm told I have raw talent, Serlina went on, and she flashed her jacket open wide, and lo, there was black lace, and behold, there was much cleavage. Clearly, the immigration agent hadn't surrendered all his basic urges during MIB training and indoctrination. After all, he knew the rules. He'd been schooled in the regulation. He understood perfectly what he was supposed to comport himself like a professional at all times because he was, after all, the best of the best. But he was also human. His eyes popped, his jaw dropped, and he went into a full deer-in-the-headlights stunned stare before the splendor of Serlina's bared assets. He wasn't alone. The men in black prided themselves on being team players, and this occasion was no exception. The sight of Serlina's perfect body, arrayed in Victoria's Secret's finest and flimsiest lingerie, along with her handmade leather additions, nabbed the undivided attention of every individual customs agent along the line. Her bosom exerted a black hole-like gravitational pull on all the available male eyeballs in the area, and there was a clear sound of vertebrae cracking like bullwhips and jaws hitting the floor like sacks of flour. That was when Scrad and Charlie launched Phase 2. The 2-headed alien collapsed with a loud thud. Charlie's eyes rolled back in his head dramatically as a wildly distraught Scrad, "Help! Help! Heart attack!" He snaked his head around in an attempt to blow the breath of life into Charlie's mouth, meanwhile pounding rhythmically on his own chest, administering a bizarrely repellent version of CPR. "Don't die on me, man!" he cried. "Come on, you no good son of a bitch! Don't do it! Hang in there! Damn it! Can we get some help here?" He appealed to the room. Those few MIB agents, not yet in thrall to Serlina's formidable bosom, came running over to render first aid. It was just what she had been waiting for. Like the hedge of magically sprouting thorns in Sleeping Beauty, neural roots sprang from Serlina's hands, growing at a fabulous rate, leaping out, doubling back on themselves, securing scores of green snaky cables that swiftly wound themselves around every MIB agent in the vicinity. The roots became a series of unbreakable bonds, then an inescapable mass of brambles immobilizing Earth's best of the best, like flies in a spider web. Serlina threw her head back and laughed. It was a hokey, melodramatic, overdone, supervillain's laugh of evil triumph. But by God, she'd earned it. Ha ha ah 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 ah. That was the laugh. Meanwhile, in a room whose curving glass sides conjured up images of the world's biggest goldfish bowl, Jay was introducing Kay to a handy-dandy modern appliance no household would be without. "The deneuralizer," he said, indicating the outlandish machine taking up most of the space inside the giant fishbowl. Kay regarded it neutrally. He had been relieved of his U.S. Postal Service uniform and was back in the black, wearing the same classic outfit as his former partner. All that was missing was a pair of Ray-Bans. Not that Kay needed shades to look cool. He came by it naturally. Jay knew this, and it bugged him. Sure, he was happy to have friends back. And as soon as he ran him through the deneuralizer, he was pretty certain that Kay would be happy to be back too. But what was it about this guy's attitude? Did nothing impress him? Could one man be so hardcore, so effortlessly? If anyone was going to have the coolness laid down, paid for, monogrammed, and gift-wrapped, Jay thought he was the man for the job. He also knew that if he wanted to lay an honest claim to all that cool, he'd have to make Kay get head about something. Or that was it. Game, set, and match. The old guy took all the marbles. Jay didn't even know how he played marbles, but he figured you could dazzle Kay with his fresh chunk of alien tech that was literally at his fingertips. In a few moments, Transverse magneto energy will surge through your brain, unlocking information hidden deep and dormant that might hold in the balance the key to the Earth's very survival. He sounded like one of those mad scientists from a 1950s sci-fi flick, explaining the workings of his atomic-powered mulligan, but apparently over the top was the way to go. Kay was running his forefinger around the itchy inside of his shirt collar. "Oh," he said, obviously not paying attention. "Okay, what's that thing?" Kay asked, pointing at the deneuralizer. In the main hall, Serlena's victory was complete. She had every last agent hog-tied and powerless in the massive tangle of neural root brambles, as Scratch/Charlie gazed admiring at their leader and her handiwork. She regarded the few pitiable protruding hands and feet of her captives. "Silly planet," she stated with thick disdain. "Could rule the place with the right set of mammary glands." Charlie nodded and remarked to Scrad, "Britney Spears." He didn't get any arguments on that one. Serlena walked out, filing her nails to repair any damage the massive neural root outpouring might have done to her manicure. Scrad/Charlie followed her as closely as Mary's two-headed little lamb. Silence flowed in to fill the hall in their wake. No one else was going anywhere. The dead alien, still stranded in mid-autopsy, had more of a chance of moving than any of the agents Serlena had entangled. Then the alien moved. It was only a small stirring, but it was there. It came from underneath the rubbery body. It was Frank. As soon as he knew the coast was clear, the little pug stuck his head out from under the stone-dead shelter, surveyed the hall, and with a look that could only be called hangdog, said, "Oh, Jesus Christ," which just about said it all. Unaware of the takeover, Jay and Kay hooked up to the workings of the deneuralizer. Once he had his man in place, he went over to a nearby computer keyboard and punched in the preliminary information necessary for the restoration of Kay's memories. "Ready?" he asked when he was done. "Sure this contraption is going to get me my memories back?" Kay asked in a tone that implied he believed it when he saw it, and even when he'd be wanting to get a few affidavits. "Yeah, if your advanced years haven't killed them already," Jay shot back. Kay got his mouth open, ready to fire off a fresh reply, but before he could utter a word, Jay grabbed the opportunity to shove a mouthpiece between the man's lips. Jay enables his communicator and reported, "Zed, we're ready to go." There was no reply. "Zed." Silence. Unexplained silence from Zed was not a good sign. There was an explanation for Zed's silence, though Jay wasn't yet aware of it. Kay wasn't the only one having trouble getting a word in edgewise at the moment. In his office, Jed was in a similar fix, though his problem wasn't a deneuralizer mouthpiece. Zed was having the breath half choked out of his body by the hands of one very beautiful, very peeved alien. Even with his feet dangling just off the floor and Serlena's hand clutching his throat like a vice, Zed showed the stuff he was made of by managing to rasp out, "Serlena, please." She flung him to the floor like a used tissue. 25 years, Zed," she said, looking down from her perfectly sculpted nose at his sprawled body. "Glad you remembered me." "Never forget it, pretty." "Whatever you are," Zed replied wryly. He reached up under his desk, as if groping for support to help him get back on his feet. What he was really reaching for was one of about 50 bright red panic buttons. He didn't even have to double-check his choice with a sideways glance. His finger zeroed in on one marked Deneuralizer Room, a place for everything and everything in its place, even emergency alert buttons. That was Zed's way. The loud, unignorable blast of the klaxon sounded through the deneuralizer room, followed by the wail of a siren. Jay's head jerked around just as the room's glass door shut, sealing him and Jay inside the transparent bowl-shaped chamber. "Breach," Jay snapped, looking grim. He got Kay out of the deneuralizer in a hurry, saying, "We're being firewalled and flushed." "Flushed?" his former partner repeated, his voice suspicious. flushed, Jay confirmed. Clarify, Jay commanded. Ever been to a water park? Jay crossed his arm over his chest and shot Kay a look that indicated he should follow suit. The other man instinctively mimicked Jay's action, but still insisted. Clara! It was a very bad day for trying to fit a word in edgewise. Before Kay could get the last syllable out, the floor beneath his feet opened wide, becoming the mouth of a colossal drain as torrents of bright blue water came pouring into the glass room from above, gallons upon gallons sweeping them off their feet. The irresistible force struck Jay and Kay with all the power of a battering ram, hurling them around the curved sides of the room twice before. When Jay said they were going to be flushed, he meant it. They shot down the drain at fantastic speed, the floor shutting tight behind them. Screaming, they barreled through glass tubes on a wild, water-borne ride. As they picked up momentum, their bodies became human torpedoes, the emergency evacuation system sending them banking, turning, and corkscrewing down the pipes. Kay's face was pulled back into a grotesquely warped version of itself, and still he managed to finish the last thing he'd been trying to say back in the deneuralizer room, namely, Fire! Jay didn't know whether he wanted to admire the man for his perseverance in the face of adversity or smack him a good one for being stubborn as a mule. Mentally, he voted for mule. Then he screamed some more. Times Square is the heart of the Great White Way, the hub of the theater district, the crossroads of the city. Here you can still follow the news of the world as it's spelled out on electronic crawl that circles the famous building where the ball drops every New Year's Eve, or get the latest word on how your investments are doing by casting a glance at the bigger-than-big LED display at the NASDAQ market site tower. The buildings surrounding Times Square form walls of flashing, glittering, scintillating neon, all advertising products for sale. This is the area famous for those big gimmick billboards, where in decade past smoke rings puffed forth from the mouth of the giants who were enjoying that cool, refreshing cigarette. Back in the days before the Surgeon General's warning. You can't look anywhere here without being slapped right across the eyes by a hard sell. Even the sidewalk beneath your feet carries stenciled messages urging you to go here, go there, and fork over the cash once you arrive. It's also the place where, if you hang around long enough, the whole world will pass you by at a brisk trot. All those people distracted by their own affairs, or simply bedazzled by all the pretty flashing lights. They probably won't even notice you standing there, but the police will. It wasn't all that long ago that Times Square was synonymous with sleaze. The lovable lowlifes of quaint Damon Runyon stories gave way to far less picturesque riffraff, while the diners and horn and hard art automats gave way to peep shows and movie theaters offering adult entertainment. And then, just when it looked as if there wasn't a bottle of bleach big enough to get all the stains out of the Great White Way, Times Square was cleaned up, transformed into a tourist-friendly theme park, and the police are there up at all hours of the day and night to see that you don't scuff it up again, at least not too much. At the corner of West 44th Street and Broadway stood two large metal tanks. They were both marked nitrogen, and they had any number of duplicates scattered on the street corners all around the city. Just another part of the urban scenery, the visual equivalent of background noise or music. Thousands of people passed by them thousands of times a day, and no one would bother to remark on their presence any more than they would notice a curb every time they crossed the street. If anyone did happen to notice the tanks, they wouldn't give them a second thought. Nitrogen? What the heck does the man on the street know from nitrogen? Especially the New York man on the street. These nitrogen tanks, however, these tanks were special. I need a little sip. Yummy. Dusk was falling over the city, including the corner of 44th and Broadway, as a pair of matching doors set seamlessly into the bodies of two particular tanks swung open. There stood J&K, soaking wet. Even the wildest water park ride has to stop somewhere, and this was it, the end of the line. They stepped onto the sidewalks where pedestrians went washing past, with places to go, people to see, and afterward drinks to drink. The crowd just swerved around them. No one paused. No one even glanced up. New York. Gotta love it. It's said that during the worst days of the Spanish Inquisition, a great scholar came upon suspicion of heresy. The agents of the Inquisition found him giving a lecture to one of his classes and carried him off for questioning. He was imprisoned in the Inquisition dungeons, but despite their best efforts, his interrogations were unable to trump up a conviction, and so after 3 years he was set free. Whereupon he went back to the university, stood up in front of his students, and announced in Latin, as we were saying the other day, as if nothing worth mentioning had transpired. When Jay stepped out of his tank, he turned to Kay and said, "Flushed." If he'd known any Latin himself, he may have said, "QED, Cod erat demonstrandum," which is how, when asked to explain the obvious, the ancient Romans used to say, "Well, duh." But it didn't take a Latin scholar to see from Kay's dripping face that the man was ready to check out departure times for the next bus back to Truro. Jay thought fast, then slapped on a big grin and launched into a stream of rapid-fire chatter. "Flushed," he exclaimed cheerfully. "Man, back when you were an agent, you loved getting flushed." A quick glance at Jay that Kay wasn't buying this, so he cranked it up a notch. "Yeah, every Saturday night you'd be like, 'Flush me, Jay, flush me.' I'd be like, 'No.'" He stopped the hard sell. It just wasn't working worth a damn. Getting serious again, he spoke to his former partner with all the sincerity in his heart. "You can quit now on me, Kay." Oh, fuck. Can you seriously what was from? "You can quit on me now, Kay." Still standing motionless in his tank, Kay calmly replied, "I saved the world. You tell me why I stare at the stars?" He straightened his dripping tie and stepped out onto the curb. "Cool," Jay said, relieved that he wasn't about to lose Kay as easily as he'd feared. "Hop in." He pulled out his keychain and hit a button on the car alarm. "Hop in what?" Kay asked. The sleek black Mercedes that was Jay's pride and joy came screaming around the corner and squealed to a dead-on-dime stop in front of them. An MIB autopilot dummy, dressed in full MIB uniform, was sitting behind the wheel. Jay hit another button on his keychain, and the agent collapsed. The onboard mechanism sucked the PVC mannequin back into its compartment. "That come standard?" Kay asked as he got in the door and Kay asked as they got into the car and slammed the doors. "Used to be a black dude," Jay answered wryly as they got into the car. "But he got pulled over too often." The Mercedes drove like a dream. At the wheel, Jay tried to contact someone to determine what had caused the breach and to get some idea of the status back at headquarters. He tapped the button on the steering wheel and commanded, "Computer, surveillance, MIB." Immediately, a video display pivoted up in front of them and began to scroll through a rotating series of images, each one showing a different perspective of Men in Black headquarters. Things looked grim. Serlina's all-imprisoning neural root bundle dominated the Great Hall. The aliens who had been passing through customs were gone, either scattered and fled or caught up in Serlina's takeover. No moving MIB agents could be seen anywhere. But some of us got out, Jay thought to himself. Some of us had to get out. Whoever did this, they may be good, but they're not as good as we are. No way. Round two's gonna come before they know it, and then it's payback time, baby. His grip on the steering wheel tightened. "MIB's locked down," was all he said. Suddenly, something in the midst of the images caught his eye. "Computer," he said, eagerness glinting through the veneer of cool professional detachment. "Zoom in. Camera 6. The computer obeyed, filling the small screen with a close-up shot of the gurney where the dead alien lay. It wasn't saying much, even if it was spilling its guts. Realization hit home, and Jay pressed a button that opened up a communication channel. From somewhere inside the unlucky extraterrestrial, a tone sounded, soft but clear, and definitely not gas. Frank the Pug popped out of the alien's guts, looking like a demented prairie dog. He was wearing a comm headset. "Jay," he murmured urgently, "where are you, partner?" "Flushed," Jay shot back. "MIB's code 101, Frank reported. "Who did it?" Frank raised himself a little higher out of the corpse, allowing himself to peer at Serlina. She was far enough away from the gurney that there was a small danger of their conversation being overheard. "Some chick in leather," the pug answered. "I think I've seen her in a Victoria's Secret catalog." "Stay where you are," Jay ordered. "I'll be in touch." He cut the comm link. Frank sat back down in the guts of the dead alien, muttering, "Stay where you are. I'll be in touch." He sounded disgusted but resigned. In the car, Kay was studying a shiny piece of paper. "What do you make of this?" he asked Jay. "I found it in the pocket of my suit." It was a photograph. For a moment, Jay wondered how it had gotten there. Then he realized that when a legend like Kay left the agency, his suit would have been archived, never to be issued to another agent. It was like retiring a ball player's jersey, only jerseys didn't have pockets. They'd preserved Kay's suit just as it was when he took it off for what everyone thought was the last time. In the natural order of things, no one expected him to come back and reclaim it. When he showed back up at headquarters and Jay had put in the order to be issued a uniform, the agent in charge of such things had simply reissued him his old one. The photo was of a much younger Kay. He was smiling and pointing at something, though it was impossible to see what that something might be. The background, a blue sky with white clouds, was slightly off. "Weird," Kay remarked. "Yeah," said Jay. "You're smiling." Kay changed the subject. "That, deneuralizer," he said. "Only one?" "Only official one," Jay amended. "Couple of years ago, plans leaked out onto the internet. Zed always said odds were pretty good that some kid built one in his room. It had built one in his bedroom." "So?" "Computer," Jay said. "Internet." The familiar America Online start page came up with their Mercedes video display screen, and a voice whose mellow, cordial tones were recognized by millions nationwide announced, "Welcome." Jay punched another button. He didn't care if he had a mail. Not at the moment. The eBay website popped up. His fingers flew, keying in the words, "deneuralizer." Kay watched all this with a skeptical eye. "You really think you're going to find—" he began. "Just found it," Jay said. He had. No question about that. The eBay page offered the following information. One item found for deneuralizer. Jay clicked on it and saw, "Never used. Bid starts at $200,000. Would consider a trade for a Mercedes G-Wagon." Jay scrolled further down the page to view the name of the vendor they'd be dealing with. When he saw it, he smiled. "Perfect," he said. "An old friend." The eBay page's glow lit up the interior of the Mercedes with the seller data. jackjeebs@aol.com. Perfect. That was a long chapter. I hope y'all are enjoying it over here. Enjoying your time. Got some comments going on. Julie. Love you, Julie. What a week. What a good week. Just got back from Philadelphia yesterday. That was pretty nice. Went and saw grandfather-in-law, I guess you'd call him. That was amazing. Haven't seen him in a while, and that was really nice. We wore masks the whole time, and I think Grandpa is good. I also found this sweet new card. The Fire Breather of Flame. All right, chapter 11. All of history's most successful conquerors agree. Getting your hooks into a chunk of territory is relatively easy. It's consolidating your conquest, that is, holding on to it and using it for your own purposes. That's the hard part. The Macedonian Greeks under Alexander the Great subjugated a vast empire that slipped through their fingers in short order. The Romans, under Julius Caesar, overran an even greater empire that they were able to keep under their direct control for centuries, millennia, if you count how many helpless schoolchildren have been forced to study Latin over the years. This demonstrates 3 points. One, that everyone should be grateful for the way history turned out, because things like QED, sub rosa nova, and e pluribus unum are much easier to say in Latin than in Greek. 2, that anyone can win a battle, but it's the man who plans who wins the war. Thus, the Alexander salad never made it onto menus at the finer restaurants everywhere, with or without anchovies. 3, that when it came to knowing how to confirm your conquests, Alexander and Julius both could have taken notes from Serlina. Serlina had a purpose, Serlina had a plan, and Serlina had MIB headquarters sewn up tighter than a duck's anus. As soon as she was sure to her mastery of the situation, she dispatched her henchman/men to locate and restrain the one individual who possessed the intelligence she required. In other words, find Kay. As she strode through the corridors, she was seething with frustration. Her own search attempts had proved to be fruitless. That made her mad. She hoped Scrad/Charlie were enjoying better success, hunting the elusive Kay through their assigned part of the building, because if they weren't, the thought of what she would do to them warmed the cockles in her heart analog with the evil anticipation that nearly cheered her up. She picked up her pace, rushing ahead to meet either success or the opportunity to inflict a whole lot of highly creative pain. She rounded a corner and nearly collided with Scrad/Charlie as he/they were hurrying to meet her at the same pace. Alien prisoners released and armed, Scrad reported to Selina. To Selina, this was small potatoes. Have you found Kay? She demanded. Neuralized, Scrad replied. Not active, Charlie added. Civilian. What? Selena was taken aback. She did not look pleased. Scrad/Charlie knew that when Selena wasn't happy, she made damn sure that no one else in her general vicinity was happy or breathing. Rapidly, the two heads ping-ponged out more information in a desperate, wild stab, keeping on her good side. But here, to get deneuralized. Deneuralized? Selena repeated. It was tough to tell how she was taking the news. Memory shot, Scrad said, frantically to mollify her. Erased. We'll find him. Don't put anything on our ears, Charlie implored, ever the believer in getting the bottom line. Scrad took over, determined to compel Selena to focus on what they had managed to accomplish, as opposed to what they had thus far failed to do. Buy some time, so he directed her attention to the line of alien prisoners who were waiting her inspection. The Men in Black motto, official or not, had always been saving the Earth from the scum of the universe. That was what the internet claimed anyhow. These aliens were scum personified. Selena walked down the line of newly freed prisoners like General George S. Patton reviewing his troops, or more accurately, like Lee Marvin checking out his crew of assorted sadists, criminals, and wackos in the Dirty Dozen. She liked what she saw. Prisoners of MIB, she said slowly, reflectively, savoring the moment. The scum of the universe. Well, now it's the scum's turn. I'm running out of time, so I'll make it simple. Whoever brings K to me gets Earth. It was a simple deal, all right. Straightforward and extremely popular with the freshly mustered troops. They were the motliest of crews, some of them looking definitely humanoid. Enough so to pass amid the throngs of ordinary earthlings without raising too much of an eyebrow. Others looked only a little less ordinary. There was one with a mouth so small it was a wonder he could eat anything but noodles. There stood another who looked as if he had been practicing hideous grimaces, and his face had become stuck. Still others had nothing humanoid about them at all, save for the fact they walked on legs and had upper limbs. When and if these creatures had been free to wander at large among the populace of Earth, they wouldn't have been able to do so without first donning full disguises. One thing united the prisoners: evil. And they liked it. They were more like Selena, for evil recognizes its own. Besides which, Serlina was freeing them to do once more what they did best, namely, their worst. Those who could smiled with nasty anticipation. Their teeth were as ugly as their moral characters. Those physically incapable of smiling showed their eagerness to serve Serlina and their own interests in other ways, some of them nauseating. Serlina turned away from the lineup, back to Scrad/Charlie. "Start by finding the deneuralizer," she instructed him/them. "They'll be trying to get his memory back. Find the deneuralizer and you'll find Kay." One of the erstwhile alien prisoners spoke up just as Scrad/Charlie were heading off to do Serlina's bidding. "I know a slimy creep who might have one of those." "Take them," Serlina directed her two-headed minion, indicating the line of ex-cons. "If you fail," she let Scrad/Charlie squirm for just a little while on the pointy end of that "if," "I'm going to kill you and let you watch." "The first you?" Charlie said to Scrad as they hurried out, followed by the alien Serlina had tapped to give them back up. "What was that you? Was that..." Not that it would make a whole lot of difference when push came to shove, but Charlie liked to keep the details straight in his head. Not all of the freed prisoners went with Charlie, so Scrad/Charlie. Serlina zeroed in on the last alien in the lineup and motioned him to attend to her. He turned slowly, all 8 feet of him swathed in a long black cape. His wrinkled, aged face looked even more malevolent without the bars of an energy cage blocking the view. "Yara," Serlina said, welcoming an old comrade. "Good to see you. It's a disgrace they've kept a genius like you locked away in this sewer."
"Their Eagle Scout Agent J caught me siphoning Earth's ozone to sell on the black market," the old one growled. "They're very touchy about this whole global warming thing."
That was enough of the social niceties to satisfy Serlina. In truth, she cared no more about Yara's recent imprisonment than she cared about whether the polar ice caps of Earth melted, stayed frozen, or evolved little propellers first, last, and always. Serlina cared about making the world a better place for Serlina. She got right down to business. "I need a spacecraft," she said. "Something that can travel 300 times the speed of light. More powerful than anything they have here." Yara shrugged. This was not a tall order for a creature of his genius. "Do it, and I'll give you whatever you want."
"Give me J,"
Yara said, his eyes alight with malice.
"We'll call it even."
Serlina nodded. Haggling was for chumps. Besides, what was one MIB's agent's life to her? Her consent was all Yara had been waiting for. He left without further ado. Serlina was content. She could depend on him. That was what she liked about Yara. The way he didn't dance around a deal. The way he put his cards on the table, kept it simple. Told you his price up front, take it or leave it. Well, that and his utter contempt for Earthlings. She liked that about him, too. Now there was only one more thing to do. She walked over to a small alien robot and said, "Catbot, come with me. I have something special for you." The little robot followed her obediently. Serlina always liked to have something special for everyone she met, even if something was a particularly painful death. Some people just live to give. Okay. That was silly. My mouth is getting quite dry. Chapter 12, my friends. Jack Jeeves' pawn shop was a crummy place on the crummy corner in one of the crummier parts of the city. If the whole package were any crummier, it would have been a Krispy Kreme Donuts franchise after Godzilla stomped the place flat. For a crummy place, though, it had one mighty fancy car parked outside. The Bentley sitting at the curb gleamed like a dark pearl, even by night. J&K gave it the once-over before going into the shop. Jay couldn't quite hide his admiration for the sharp automobile. Kay could hide anything. Jeeves was behind the counter when the men in black crossed the threshold. There was nothing extraordinary about his pawn shop, per se. Shelves and display cases exhibiting a broad selection of jewelry and valuables that had been hawked from when their former owners fell on hard times. But the proprietor thereof was another story. He was a lowlife, a plug-ugly creep with frizzy black hair, pendulous lips, pop eyes like a cartoon frog, sucking on an air hose that could pick up radio broadcasts from Arizona, a nose that was on every anteater's wish list for Christmas, and a 5 o'clock shadow like a smear of shoe polish spread over sagging cheeks and jowls. His style of dress was tastelessness personified. His gold neck chains and bracelets might be pricey, but on him, they looked cheap. And those who knew him well had learned that he made up for his lack of physical appeal by being a whiny, cowardly, self-centered, opportunistic jerk. When he saw Jay, he smiled. His teeth were as rotten as his personality. "Hey, Jay," he exclaimed. "Haven't seen you in a while. Check out my wheels?" He nodded towards the door, laying prideful claim to the Bentley waiting outside. "Business is booming from the internet. That was when Kay came in. Ebenezer Scrooge reacted to the black-shrouded ghost of Christmas yet to come with more aplomb. "Uh-oh," said Jeeves. Like many of Earth's residents, aliens who chose to slink along in the shadowy borderlands between honest society and the underworld, he'd had plenty of run-ins with Kay in the past. None of them had turned out the way he would have liked. Jeeves ducked out of sight behind the counter. Only his nasal voice rose up in protest. "He's retired. He... Jeeves, we need the deneuralizer," Jay said. He didn't feel like putting up with a whole lot of Jeeves jive. Not with MIB headquarters in lockdown, Zed not answering any calls, Earth's future on everything go boom line. He didn't even like dealing with Jeeves without any of the messy stuff going down. This guy was like a garden slug. He left a trail of slime over everything in his general vicinity. Too bad you couldn't rid yourself of the obnoxious varmint by sprinkling him with salt. Jeeves' head popped up from behind the counter. He looked at Kay, who regarded the pawn shop owner with unfeigned indifference. There was nothing in the former MIB agent's eyes to indicate that he recognized Jeeves, but that might not mean a thing. "You're kidding," Jeeves said rarely. "Meter's running, Jeeves," Jay said, with just a hint of move it or lose it. Jeeves came out from behind the counter and walked right up to Kay. "Know me?" he challenged. "Can't say that I do," Kay replied. "Pretty good with faces. Think I'd remember that," sticking his finger in Jeeves' face. Jeeves threw his head back and let loose a loud, gloating guffaw. "Ha! The great Kay's a neutral. Love it. Just love." Kay thrust his face right into Jeeves' ugly mug so abruptly that the pawnshop owner could count the hairs on his eyelashes. "Friend, you're standing between me and my memories," Kay told him. And this time there was an unmistakable note in his voice. "You got this thing or not?" "No," said Jeeves. Jay gave him a look. The little stug started talking fast. Even if I did, if it doesn't work, he dies. You kill me. If it does work, I've brought back Kay, who'll hound me to my dying day. What's my incentive here?" Jay aimed his weapon right between Jeeves' bulbous, googling eyes. "Doesn't friendship count for anything, Jeebsy?" he crooned. Now that was incentive like Mama used to make. Jeeves swallowed hard and appeared to give in. He headed for the door to the cellar, opened it, and started down. "I keep it down here, next to the snowblowers, homie." His voice echoed back up the stairs as Jay and Kay descended after him, taking care never to let the slippery customer get too far out of range. Slime has a way of oozing away between the cracks if you give it a chance. Jeeves' version of the deneuralizer was a far cry from the classy top-of-the-line model now lost in the firewall and flush of MIB headquarters. It looked a lot like what would happen if all the good old 1950s B-movie mad scientists' laboratories threw up at once. The chair where the victim, subject, sat had been scavenged from a dentist's office and was set up with a mostly open spherical metal framework. Some of the wiring was exposed. Gaffer's tape was everywhere. A few plumbing pipes struck out here and there. Bits and pieces of a cannibalized iMac computer were hitched up to God knows what of every professional electrician's worst nightmares. The weird thing was, the whole Rube Goldberg contraption came close to resembling an electric chair, and Kay was the candidate for the hot seat. Nonetheless, he sat down. "Ever use this thing?" he inquired. "Ever use this thing?" he inquired, his fingers curling over the ends of the armrests. "I used the exhaust fan once to make some hot air popcorn, but that's about it," Jeeves replied. He shoved the mouthpiece into Kay's lips. It was nasty. "Have you removed all your jewelry?" Jeeves asked. Kay nodded. "Are you allergic to shellfish?" Kay gave him a death stare. The pawnbroker shrugged. He'd been on Earth long enough to know the value of covering his butt from even the remotest possibility of negligence lawsuit. He feared the men in black, but he absolutely dreaded lawyers. "Okay," Jeeves said, his preparations complete. He hit a switch. The machine lurched to life. Electricity flowed through unknown channels. The exhaust fan whizzed and spun madly. In the chair, Kay's eyes dilated to almost complete blackness. Outside the pawn shop, all over Manhattan, the lights in streets and homes and offices leapt and died and leapt back on again as huge power surges ravaged the city. Sparks flew, arcs crackled, computers coughed once, twice, pathetically, then rolled over and played dead. And lo, there was much wailing and gnashing of teeth and frantic calling of tech support. It took only an instant. "That's it," said Jeeves, flicking the switch off. As soon as the juice stopped flowing, Kay launched backwards out of the chair and hit the floor behind it. His whole body was shaking uncontrollably. Smoke poured out of his ears while a horrified Jay watched, helpless. Then it was all over. He lay still, dead still. Jay and Jeeves leaned in over the limp body. "Kay," Jay said, trying not to think of the unthinkable. Jeeves was less affected. "Dead," he pronounced cavalierly. "Oh, well." His head exploded. Jay didn't even flinch when the blast hit. He knew there was only one thing that could have wiped that devil-may-care smirk off Jeeves' face, along with the rest of his repulsive head. He glanced down to where Kay was sitting up, holding the noisy cricket that had just done its part for the urban beautification. "Kay, you back?" he asked. He meant memory-wise, of course. Dead men don't pack heat. "No," Kay replied. "Then how did you know his head would grow back?" Jay asked. It was true. Jeeves is vulnerable to many things. Just not having his head blown off. It was painful and it was messy, but he always grew himself a new one in jig time. "It grows back?" Jay asked in unmasked disappointment. As they spoke, Jeeves' head was already regenerating. First it butted up out of the ravaged neck, reforming as a slightly gooey miniature of its former self, with some of the facial features grossly out of proportion to others. Next it began to inflate like a hideous balloon until it reached its proper size. "Nice," Jeeves muttered sarcastically through the process. "Real nice." "Kay, you sure you don't remember?" Jay pressed. Kay got up, brushed himself off, and simply said, "Take care," before heading for the cellar stairs. "Kay!" Jay's cry went unheeded. "Kay, wait!" Jeeves called after him. "I never got the updated software. I'm still working on the 6.0. Your brain needs a reboot. Give it a minute, for crying out loud." It was no good. Kay climbed up the steps and was gone. Jeeves turned to Jay, his eyes damp with regret and sincerity. "Bottom of my heart, Jay," he said. "Really sorry. I hope this doesn't affect our friendship, which is based on years of loyalty, trust, and respect for one another." He might have had more to say. He might not. He might have had to pause in order to get a bigger shovel. But whatever the case, he didn't have to say much more because there was a deafening crack, boom, clatter, clatter as the back wall of the pawn shop basement was kicked in with 4 vicious-looking aliens armed to the teeth / gills / tendrils stormed in. Jay took one look at these uninvited guests and did a quick turn and tumble behind the deneuralizer. "Where is he?" the first alien growled at Jeeves. "Over there," Jeeves said, pointing towards the deneuralizer and the hidden J without a second's hesitation. Some would call this a betrayal, but if you asked Jeeves, he would insist that it was a betrayal that came out of a friendship based on years of loyalty, trust, respect. The alien took aim at the deneuralizer and fired. Jeeves' cobbled-up piece of techno-junk disintegrated with a thunderous boom, revealing J, his own formidable weapon out and trained on the aliens, who had their weapons trained on him. They circled each other slowly, in that classic no-win situation that the men in black liked to call Gurkhusian standoff.
"Where is he?"
the first alien demanded.
"Where is K?"
Jay wasn't about to say, but Jeeves didn't suffer from fear of public speaking. He opened his mouth to be helpful with his newfound buddies, but his urge to be chatty vanished suddenly, along with his head, in a moist and sticky explosion. He staggered out of the room, complaining through rapidly regrowing lips.
"Right in the mouth. Nothing's gonna taste right."
"No idea," Jay said, without taking his eyes or attention off of his four circling adversaries. He recognized them from MIB lockup. Not merely the scum of the universe, but the scum suckers. And ugly. They were the living proof that there was some of that. The saying, "handsome is as handsome does," held true in the inverse, too. He mentally reviewed everything he knew about them, from their planet of origins to their criminal records to the length of time they ought to be serving in the slammer, if someone hadn't set them free and sicked them on his tail. His and K's. These guys were ruthless killers who couldn't find compassion in the dictionary, mainly because they devoured the librarian who tried to show them how to use the book. And if these were the underlings, he couldn't wait to meet the boss. He studied the row of faces glowing at him. Some of these boys make old Jeeves look like Brad Pitt, he thought. He made a careful, strategic repeat, placing one of the cellar's up-breached walls on his back. "Give up," one of the aliens hissed. Jay showed his teeth. "I like my odds." Never played dice with the universe. Two unfriendly arms burst through the wall behind Jay. One wrapped itself around his throat. The other jerked the weapon out of his hand, but not before he managed to fire off one devastating shot, blasting away the bottom half of the first alien. Unlike Jeeves, this creep isn't going to be making any kind of comeback. "Where's K?" one of the remaining creatures demanded. Jay said nothing, putting on the same stone face he'd seen K wear in a similar situation many times before. His stoic silence didn't please his inquisitor. The alien picked him up and hurled him across the room, where a second one intercepted him in mid-flight with a hard forearm blocked to the throat. Jay went down, sprawling. He opened his eyes slowly to see a fresh face in the crowd. A fresh pair of faces, that is. Scratch/Charlie regarded him from a short distance away, with a patient, pitying gaze that was as genuine as a politician's promise to cut taxes and increase government spending. "We really need K," Scrad spoke, if explaining the situation to Jay in this way would be enough to get results. "He's a neural," Jay forced the words out of a bruised throat. "He was neuralized." "Tell us something we don't know," Scrad said. "Yeah," Charlie popped up, that is 2 cents worth. "Tell us something we don't." His contribution to the interrogation was interrupted by a big, wet sneeze that sprayed all over the back of Scrad's head. Scrad stiffened, staring straight ahead, mortified. "I am so sorry," Charlie offered. Scrad froze him out, gave him the cold shoulder. He walked over to where Jay lay, surrounded by the extraterrestrial ex-cons. "I'm not much for violence," he began. He motioned to one of the aliens, who gleefully gave Jay a solid kick to the stomach. The MIB agent grunted and curled up into a ball. "But if I don't bring K back, a certain squiggly someone is going to kick my ass. So where is he?" Don't know," said Jay, panting for breath. The alien that had kicked him leaned in close, leering. "You don't look too good," he observed smugly. "You look like a can of cream corn somebody threw up," Jay countered. It was a pretty accurate assessment. The alien in question was a pebbly yellow complexion, with the spiky protuberances framing his face actually made him look more like a horned toad that had been sculpted out of cream corn. Not that Jay had the time or opportunity to work out a more precise description. He landed a good punch, good enough to lay open the creature's grisly face. Another one of the remaining aliens laughed, which caused Jay to look at him and add, "And you look like something that came out of the dog that ate him." This was not only deserved, but accurate, disgustingly so. Back on his home turf, this alien had been counted as one of the most physically attractive of his kind. In fact, he'd been well on his way to becoming a supermodel before he fell in love with the bad crowd, turned to a life of crime, and had to flee to the sanctuary of Earth. It was a source of great bitterness to him to realize that here his looks were only one step away from the contents of every pooper scooper in the greater metropolitan area. Enraged, the butt of Jay's vibe stuck him with the butt of his weapon. "Can't take a joke unless it's on somebody else, lousy out-of-towner." The words peeled through Jay's mind, distracting him a little from the pain. "Bend him," Scrad directed. Such a simple command. The alien with corn kernel complexion picked Jay up, held him high over his head, and began to bend his spine backward, the way the strong man at the circus might show off by bending an iron bar. But iron bars don't feel a thing. "Where's Kay?" Scrad demanded again, as Jay's spine was pulled back, until it was a miracle that it didn't snap in two. "Where's Kay?" Scrad repeated loudly, enough to make himself heard over the sound of Jay's agonized scream. The answer to Scrad's question was standing on the sidewalk just outside of Jeeb's pawn shop, trying to get across the street. The traffic in New York was a wee bit more hectic than in Truro. His first attempt at crossing had nearly ended at the bumper of a speeding taxicab. Kay stepped back onto the curb just in time. As he waited for an opening in the flow of vehicles, he couldn't help looking around, taking in his surroundings. Funny how some things were just a part of the passing scene, while others leapt out and caught your eye. A postman walked by. Kay followed him with his eyes and noticed that he hardly broke a stride as he tucked a long, scaly tail back into his shorts. A tandem bicycle flew past, surrounded by blinking lights, a boombox thumping on the handlebars. A street person wandered past, pushing a grocery cart filled with all sorts of junk. The gleanings of other people's rubbish. Kay stared into the cart as it passed. Two glowing red eyes stared back. A pair of little alien hands hooked their fingers over the wire lip of the cart. Kay shook his head. This was worse than the incident back in the Truro post office. Why was he seeing things? Why these kinds of things? It was no good. He had to get out of this place. Somehow he was convinced that all of this craziness was somehow New York City's fault. He needed to get back to Truro, when everything would be okay. A man that could hold his own sanity in Truro. If he could only get back to Truro. If he could only get across this goddamn New York street. He saw a gap in the traffic and got ready to step off the curb. Glancing down at his feet, he noticed a cockroach. One of those big, muscular, steroid-enriched cockroaches that could whip its weight in sewer lizards. Instinctively, he lifted his shoe to squash the disgusting bug, like, well, a bug. He stopped, his shoe hovering above the doomed insect. Something was happening inside his head. A series of little flashes, like a string of exploding light bulbs, was going off, strobing through his memory, illuminating an ever-growing swarm of moments from his lost past. A picture zapped in and out of sight, the image of another bug that he knew wasn't just another bug. He knew this bug's name. Edgar? All at once, he knew that not every bug you saw on the streets of New York was what it seemed to be. No more than every postman or every street person or... Kay lowered his shoe gently, stepping it down beside the cockroach. The insect looked up. "Damn decent of you," it remarked, and scuttled away. Kay wasn't listening. He was gazing up into the night. Little by little, the glimmer of a smile crossed his face like a distant shooting star. We're still going on in this chapter. Back in the basement of Jeeb's pawn shop, Jay wasn't smiling. Scrad/Charlie and the other intergalactic scumfuckers watched fascinated as their accomplice continued to bend the MIB agent's spine backwards like a plastic straw. Sweat-drenched Jay's entire body, which shook violently as he tried desperately to fight the pain, to will it away. Jay's torment was having an effect on at least one of the spectators. Charlie lowered his head, looking a little green. "I think I'm going to be sick," he choked. You really don't want to do that, Scrod cautioned him, still remembering the colossal sneeze. And then, just when it looked as if the basement were about to echo with the sound of snapping vertebrae, Jay went limp as a leaf of boiled lettuce. The alien holding him overhead flung his slack body to the floor with a sneer. The MIB agent had undergone torture intense enough to wring information out of solid marble, and he hadn't said a word. There was only one conclusion to draw. I think he's telling the truth, Scrat said. Then he's no good to us. Jay's extraterrestrial torturer said. He smiled, showing off a mouthful of teeth like a great white shark's, then pulled out a particularly nasty-looking gun and took aim on the helpless man at his feet. There was a loud report, and the air was filled with tiny particles of the formerly living thing. Jay was still there. Sharkmouth wasn't. The cellar air shimmered with the particles of one totally vaporized off-world tough guy. Kay looked down at his partner, holding the noisy cricket that had blown Sharkmouth to kingdom come, and said, Didn't I teach you anything slick? No doubt about it this time. Kay was back. Really back. The remaining aliens rushed him, thirsting for blood, avid to be one to put an end to a legend. Scratch/Charlie cowered in a corner where Jeeves had amassed a pile of pawnable junk. For a while, the two-headed henchman wondered if it would be a good idea to remind these guys that Serlina wanted Kay taken alive. It didn't look like any of them was thinking along those lines. Scrad opened his mouth to speak, only to have Charlie snake his head around in front of him and shake it savagely with the universal symbol for nuh-uh. That was good, it said. What, am I the only sane one here? Scrad recognized the wisdom in this and dived under the junk pile. Maybe Kay would be alive when this was all over. Maybe not. If not, he'd worry about what to tell Serlina later. After all, later was another day, or something. From the floor, a battered Jay played armchair quarterback, while Kay took on the last three aliens single-handedly. One of them had a face that put a child's early experiments with silly putty. He pulled a knife and thrust it at Kay. "Gay rune, Kay!" Jay shouted. Go for the mosh tendrils!" Kay grabbed the squirming cluster of vine-like sprouts, shoots sprouting from the knife-wielding alien's chin, and tore them off. The alien dropped the knife and collapsed, writhing in agony. A human-like alien wearing a cap low on his forehead leapt in to take his fallen partner's place. "Pineal eye!" Jay called out. Without an instant's hesitation, Kay grabbed the cap off the oncoming alien's head, revealing the bulbous third eye. He nailed it with his fist, and the creature went down. "On your left!" Jay warned him. Kay wheeled around and saw the third alien. He wore a turtleneck sweater high, so high it almost covered the lower half of his face, and for very good reason. Some evolutionary practical joke had caused this particular species to evolve two large dangling globes of flesh that hung down heavily beneath his chin. "Go for the—" "Self-explanatory," Jay concluded, and gave the balls a mighty roundhouse punch that sent the alien reeling out of commission and singing soprano. Looks like you were in a tight spot there, sport," Kay remarked, helping Jay to his feet. Jay brushed this off with a carefree, "I had it handled." That was the instant the gay rune picked to pop up behind him, out of tendrils and out of temper, ready to go some impromptu rend and shred. Kay pointed the noisy cricket right at Jay, who jumped straight up, doing a split in midair. Kay fired right between Jay's legs, and the noisy cricket blew the gay rune to smithereens before Jay hit the ground. Securing his weapon, Kay said, "You need a partner." "Had one," Jay replied. "Job got too rough for him. Now he's delivering Hallmark cards." He looked at Kay meaningfully. "I'm back," Kay said tersely. "Took in your shirt." "Your memory's totally back?" Jay probed. He wanted to believe. Wanted it more than anything. "That's right." "Light of Zartha?" Jay said, and waited for the explanation, the big revelation, the answer to the mystery. "Never heard of it," Kay said. "Let's go." He started back up the basement steps. Jay took one look back over his shoulder, checking out the devastation in the basement. Everything was quiet, that ominous haunting silence that comes after all great battles. Jeeb's cellar was strewn with the bodies and particulate matter of dead aliens. It was hard to get a body count on the ones that Kay had vaporized, but Jay was pretty sure he'd managed to keep track of how many there had been. It didn't add up. See a two-headed freak on your way in? See a two-headed freak on your way in? He asked Kay. No, Kay replied, almost at the top of the steps. I saw Jeeves, with no head, running down the alley. Jay frowned and then put it temporarily out of his mind. Damn, it was good to be working with Kay again. They left the basement. As soon as the sound of their footsteps faded out, the junk pile in the corner stirred, and Scrad/Charlie emerged. We got problems, Scrad said. From the day we were born, Charlie agreed. Oh! Got him. Chapter 13. The black Mercedes was still waiting for them when they emerged from the pawn shop. Now, your ordinary New Yorker, if there is such thing as ordinary New Yorker, might be somewhat startled by this. Not that a classy car like that might not be safe on the city streets. Nuh-uh. But New York is a magical city where some classy cars do a fast disappearing act when left by themselves in certain sections of the Big Apple. That or they grow eggs and lots to walk away, which is another kind of magic. What are you gonna do? It literally says that. WHADDAYAGONNADO. What the fuck? But not the Mercedes. Even in Jeeb's neighborhood, a prima car like that one was safe as a house. In fact, many houses were a lot less secure than the Mercedes. Any punk who thought he was man enough to take this Mercedes for a joyride will come out of the experience unable to feel anything resembling joy ever again, if he came out of it at all. If your memory's back, how come you don't know anything about the light of Zartha? Jay asked Kay as they headed for the car. Must have neuralized myself, Kay said. To keep the information from me. He spoke as though it all made perfect sense. On some level it probably did, though not to his partner. Good plan, Jay replied with a sardonic twist of his lips. There was a brief moment of conflict when both of them reached for the driver's side door at the same time. I drive, said Kay, reasserting his old authority as senior partner of the team. Yeah, a little blue van that says U.S. Mail, Jay shot back. He was glad to have Kay back, no mistake about that, but he would be damned if he was going to relinquish this right to drive. Back in Kay's day, the MIB still drove the old Ford LTDs. Now, who did he think he was, expecting to shoot right back up to the top of the pecking order? Back less than 10 minutes, and already it's the same old crap. Jay fumed as he tried to stand his ground and hold on to his right to the driver's seat. Kay paid him no attention, muscling him aside and getting behind the wheel. He looked uncomfortable. Doesn't feel right, he said. It's not the side you open the mailbox from, Jay told him. I meant you pretending you're in charge, Kay clarified. Scene of the crime, he said, declaring their next destination. Or was he asking for directions? Jay just stood there. Kay gave him a hard look. Jay shrugged. Forgot where it is. Must have neuralized myself before. Game, set, and match. He motioned for Kay to get out of the car. Kay did so, grudgingly, and Jay took his place behind the wheel. Kay got into the passenger side. You become a real wise ass, he informed Jay. Taught me everything I know, slick, Jay replied with a grin as the Mercedes peeled away from the curb, heading for Soho. On the way there, Jay briefed Kay on everything he knew about the case so far. He was still doing so when the Mercedes pulled up in front of Ben's Famous Pizza. He was Zarthan, and she was Kylothian. No doubt about that, he said, describing the victim and the perp. Laura, the witness, saw the whole thing. If you completed her interrogation, why didn't you neuralize her? Kay wanted to know. Jay dodged the question, opening his door and getting out. Scene of the crime, he announced, and headed for the pizzeria door before Kay could say another word. It wasn't that easy to shake the restored Agent Kay when he scented a violation of the MIB regs. As they walked into the dark, empty pizzeria, He was in full dress-down lecture mode. MIB procedural code number 773/I1 clearly states that all civilian witnesses must be neuralized within. He ducked in mid-discourse, just in time to avoid being whacked in the face by a large pizza tray that came swinging out of the darkness. Kay's old reflexes were back too. Jay wasn't so quick. The pizza tray hit him full in the face, making a lovely reverberating clang. He went down. It would have been It would have been a pure Bugs Bunny moment, if not for the fact that it wasn't a rabbit holding the tray, but Laura. Kay whipped out his noisy cricket and an eye blink and pointed at her. "No!" Jay shouted through the rain in his ears, yanking Kay's arm down. "Jay," Laura cried, dropping to her knees, hugging the tray to her chest. "I heard a noise out here, and I'm sorry." "It's okay. I'm cool," Jay said as she helped him to his feet. To Kay, he said, "The witness, Laura. This is Kay, my old partner." "Pleasure," Kay said, as graciously as he could muster. Laura wasn't paying attention to him. She only had eyes for Jay. "Thanks for sending those agents over to keep an eye on me last night," she said with a smile. "It was very sweet." It might have been a sweet gesture on Jay's part, but it sent Kay right back in the middle of his high horse. MIB procedural code number 594B clearly states MIB personnel should never be used. "The Zarthan," Jay put in, cutting the lecture short. "Ben, he was vaporized right around here." At the mention of the Zarthan's Earth name, a change came over Kay. He became distracted, staring off into space, as if more of those little neural flashbulbs were popping through his memory. "What?" Jay asked, trying to bring him back to here and now. "Ben about 5'9", Kay inquired, still with that disdained look in his eyes. "Portly fella, thin in hair." You knew him?" Laura stared at Kay in wonderment. The restored MIB agent crossed to a framed photograph hanging on the wall of the pizzeria. It was a very old photo, taken the days before digital, before instant. The image showed Ben standing on a pier that looked like it was somewhere out on the island Montauk. Maybe. It was a standard pose for a man who had just caught himself the great-granddaddy of all gigantic bass and wants the world to remember his prowess. The fish dangled by its tail from a wooden gallows, while Ben stood there with his arm around it, beaming proudly. There was nothing too remarkable about that trophy photograph, except the background. The background, blue sky and white clouds, didn't exactly seem to belong in the shot. That was odd, and because it was so odd, Kay was certain to notice it. More than that, he was bound to remark on it and wanted to investigate the photographic phenomenon further. He usually had an eagle eye for oddities, only he didn't. This time he just studied the photo for a bit, then said, "Never saw him before in my life. Hell of a fish." And that was the oddest thing of all. He walked away from the picture. Jay was about to follow him as a nagging wisp of insight tickled his mind. He glanced back at the photograph of the happy fisherman, then went right up to it and studied it at close range. It reminded him of something he'd seen somewhere else, something not too long ago. "Kay," he summoned his partner. Then Kay joined him. Jay produced the old photograph, the one Kay that had found in the pocket of his retired MIB suit. Jay placed a picture of Kay over the picture of the dead bass and slid it up and down until the two backgrounds aligned with one another perfectly. Now the image in the frame showed Ben with his arm around Kay, who was pointing and laughing. The question was, what was he pointing at? "Hell of a fish," Jay muttered. He considered the joined image from several angles, trying to figure out what the oh-so-much younger Kay was pointing at. Nothing in the picture. It wasn't a natural pose, either. It was done with deliberation, purpose. But as for why it had been done? "So you left yourself clues?" Jay asked. "Yeah," Kay said dryly, "in case I had to be deneuralized because my replacement couldn't handle the situation." "Maybe the person who got deneuralized shouldn't have created the situation in the first place," Jay countered. "Boys," Laura stepped in before the two reunited partners could get bogged down in a bickering match. They both caught her "I don't have time for dealing with children" tone. looked at each other long and hard, dropped the quarrel, and returned to business. "Looks like you're pointing in this direction," Jay said, indicating the trajectory of Jay's telltale finger. "Pointing at something." He looked across the room to where Ben had hung a photograph of an astronaut, a real American hero, the sort who decorates pizzerias throughout the 5 boroughs. "Pointing, excuse me." Jay stepped around to his partner, and the better to follow the invisible trail. "Pointing at the astronaut." "Jay," Kay began, trying to get a word or two in edgewise. He might as well have saved his breath. Jay was gathering momentum. He studied the second photograph only an instant before declaring, "Okay, now, astronaut is pointing to those pizza boxes." He stepped over to the stack of pizza boxes and gave them a close scrutiny, particularly the logo. It was the same one that decorating the paper napkins, a slice, a statue, and a star. "Now, to the layman, these are just stacked pizza boxes," he said in his best Sherlock Holmes voice, and pointing at the boxes in question. "But to the trained eye, this is a clue." Jay was clearly pleased with himself as he continued. "This isn't a slice of pizza, but an arrow, and it's aimed directly at..." "Jay," Kay tried again. "Wait a minute, Slick." But by now, Jay was a veritable juggernaut of deduction logic, and woe betide anyone rash enough to get in his way. "Slowing me down, Slick," he told Kay. "Whatever we're looking for is in this cabinet." He could feel the spirit of Holmes hovering over him as he crossed the cabinet, indicating by the pizza/slice/arrow. Was he brilliant or what? "Jay!" You had to award Kay points for perseverance. Jay wasn't listening. Great detectives don't need to listen to their sidekicks. Sidekicks are only there to add their admiring voices to the rest of the chorus. Once the great detective had solved the mystery, that was exactly what was about to happen. As much as he wanted to bask in Laura's hero-worshipping gaze, once he produced proof that he was strong, brave, handsome, and smart too, he wanted Kay's admiration even more. He could almost hear Kay's inevitable grasp of awe as he got down and flung open the cabinet doors with a ceremonious flourish, thrusting one hand inside as he announced, "Here we go." He grabbed the prize and held it out, displaying a small, flat, brightly colored can of distinctive shape for Kay's inspection. "Anchovy fillets in virgin olive oil," he declared victorious. He wasn't sure what the heck the can would reveal when it was open, besides the promised anchovies, but by God, he was proud of himself for having found it. Anchovies. The wheel of deduction returning again. Anchovies. Fish. "We need a boat." "Jay," Kay said, bringing his partner crashing down to earth. He pointed to a key that was hanging in plain sight on the wall next to the original photograph and took it down from its nail. "Hope I'm not slowing you down, Slick." "Why didn't you just paint a sign on the wall that said Kay's secret key? Kay's secret key?" The deflated Agent K wanted to know, putting aside the can of anchovies along with his shattered dreams of glory and adulation. He watched closely as Kay turned over the key over in his fingers. On one side of it were the figures C18. On the other side, the letters GCT. Now we just have to figure out. "I know where it goes," Kay said. Before he uttered another word on the subject, he looked at Laura, then donned his Ray-Bans and took out his deneuralizer. Just plain neuralizer, not deneuralizer. Her eyes widened, but she didn't say a word as she stared at the red light. Jay's hand shot out and pulled down Kay's down hand. He pulled Kay's hand down before he could flash Laura's memories away. "No," he said. "Not yet." "MIB, procedural code number 773. Kay started up with the rulebook recitation subroutine, one of the more annoying items the deneuralizer had restored in his memory. "I know," Jay interrupted him. "I have a feeling she might be able to help us," he corrected himself quickly. "Help us." I need a little zippy sip. Much better. Jay looked at Laura and flashed her an encouraging smile. He took her by the hand. Her hand felt good in his, as if it belonged there, as if he'd spent his whole life building up to this moment, reaching out for it. And now? She was looking at him in a way that told him she felt the same way he did, and their hands belonged clasped together. That way, she was as eager as he was to put his whole weird business of aliens and secret keys behind them, so that they could stop making silly small talk and say the words that they knew they needed to be said. Unfortunately, that time had not yet arrived. "You can stay with some friends of mine," he said. "People like you?" she asked. Jay didn't answer. He decided to let it be a surprise. There's a stereotype of the swinging bachelor pad. Never actually seen one in real life, and those folks can count themselves among the fortunate. Laura Vasquez needed a safe place to stay, and as far as Jay knew, this was her best bet. As for the bachelors themselves, the proprietors of the pad per se, she figured that if she could handle the type of traffic you got in a pizza joint, she could handle these guys just fine. He just hoped she wasn't prejudiced. Too many women these days thought that the swinging bachelor was a cultural fossil, at best, and at worst some sort of miserable sexist worm. In this particular instance, Jay! Antennae a quiver, spindly digits raised in greetings, buggy black eyes alight with camaraderie. The whole caffeine-addicted pack of worm guys welcomed Jay and Laura into their humble home. It was small but sufficient to their needs, and since they were small, or rather short, there was a bit less height clearance than in a normal apartment. It was the only way they could pull out of the government salary and still own a swinging bachelor pad in New York City. Low overhead. At first sight, when looking over the apartment itself, the term that sprang to mind most readily was retro chic. Only not too much emphasis on the chic. Whoever had done the interior decorating for this slithery crew of womanizers had been clobbered over the head by a boxed video set of every Rat Pack movie ever made. The spirit of Sinatra, the Hollywood years, stalked the linoleum floors, while the great Dean Martin would have felt right at home lounging on the praying mantis green sectional sofa that serpentined its way through the living area. A fireplace stood to one side like a giant circular hibachi, with its funnel-shaped top, warming the surreal home sweet home. This was a good thing because there was also a sunken hot tub, smack dab in the middle of the living room floor, and the glittering panoramic picture of windows were bound to allow drafts to seep through. One of the wormy denizens of this hymn to a bygone "Thank You, Dear Lord" lifestyle stretched out on the sofa, reading an issue of Travel and Leisure. Another was lifting weights, working on buffing up and bulking out the gangly old multi-segmented bod. A third was paying close attention to the Miss Fitness USA on the tube, while a fourth was chilling out in the aforementioned sunken hot tub. Jay didn't have time for the social amenities. "MIB's gone code 101, he informed them brusquely. Immediately the worms broke into a manic babbling, twanging, nasaling gibberish. 101, taken over, bad, very bad. It didn't much matter which one of them said what. Curiously, though, enough, they didn't talk that way because they belonged to a hive mind or a collective consciousness or any other cliche of the annals of pop sci-fi. They just had no manners. What mattered to Jay was getting them to clam up and pay attention. "Guys, I need your help," Jay announced. He grabbed Laura, who had been standing behind him, and presented her to the group. "This is Laura." "Laura. Hey, Laura." "Yeah, baby." This was a tad salacious. This last was said a tad salaciously. The worm in question might have been leering, though with a face like that, it was hard to tell. Well, they were swinging bachelors. Laura looked at them, taking it all in with relative calm. After having seen Scrad/Charlie and Serlina and Ben's true shape beneath his fake human skin, she wasn't so easily shocked anymore. Still, she felt compelled to remark, "They're worms." This pronouncement met with general approval and jubilation in the ranks. "Worms! Yeah! Once you go worm, that's what you'll yearn." The worm guys gave way to berserk self-congratulatory displays, high-fiving each other madly just as Kay stepped into the room. "They're all talk," he told Laura. "Pretty much." Laura shrugged. "I've dated worse." This wasn't just a witty response, or an attempt to keep her spirits up in the face of a crisis beyond anything she had yet experienced. It was the plain, unvarnished truth. Anyone who says differently should try being a single attractive woman in New York for a while. Don't say you weren't warned, though. Kay's appearance was perhaps the only thing that could have excited the worm guys any more than their own smooth repartee. "Kay, you're back," they chorused. One of their number, a worm with the euphonious name of Sleeble, said, "Somebody said you were dead. You look good." It was unclear whether he meant for a dead guy or not. "They're on suspension," Jay explained to his partner. "Caught stealing office supplies." Another worm, who went by the name of Giebel, casually shoved a huge case of cigarettes behind him and his foot and protested, "We were framed. Zed's wormophobic." His comrade slash sibling slash roommate Sleeble backed him up. Kay didn't care. "We're double parked," he commented. He turned to go. Jay knew Kay was right. They didn't have much time, but before he left Laura behind, he wanted to do everything he could to make sure he'd be all right. She'd be all right. He spoke earnestly and intently to the worms. "Look, Laura is very important to me." In the doorway, Kay paused for a moment and glanced back over his shoulder. Giving him a probing look, Jay quickly added, "To us. To MIB. As a witness to all. So I want you to keep an eye on her." The worms were more than happy to accept this awesome responsibility. "Definitely. No problem. Keep both of them on her." How could he tell when a worm was leering with those mouths? Worms were born leering. The worm watching TV mentioned to Laura. "Why don't you sit over here?" he offered, patting the seat beside him invitingly. "Yeah, you got a shot," the weightlifting worm sneered. "Shut up. Make me." Jay and Laura ignored the macho squabbling. "My communicator," he said softly, handing it to her. If Kay had been within earshot, he probably would have rattled out the MIB procedural code number that strictly prohibited agents from loaning their equipment to civilians. But if Kay was anywhere near enough to overhear, he didn't bother. It was just as well. If he had spoken up, Jay would have told him to back off. No matter what Kay thought, Jay knew that now, maybe for the rest of his life, there was at least one thing in the world more important than the MIB rules and regulations. To him, anyway. Laura took the device and gave Jay a kiss, as if it were the most natural thing to do. It was impulsive, and her expression said it surprised her almost as much as it did him. But one of those nice surprises that came too seldom in life. Clearly, she thought the world needed more of them. Startled, blindsided by a bewildering storm of emotions, wishes, duties, and desires, Jay did the only thing he could do. He warned her to stay away from the lecherous Nebel and told her not to fall asleep. Then he ran. He had a world to save, didn't he? Not every man was lucky enough to have an excuse so big for getting himself out of an emotionally awkward situation. Laura watched him go, dazed by her own feelings, then turned from the door. A colorful spinner met her eyes. One of the worms was holding it up eagerly, looking hopeful. "Twister!" they all clamored. Laura did a mental shrug this time. What the hell? She had dated worse. All right. I think 14's a little showy. And then we're gonna... Yeah. One more chapter, my friends. I wouldn't trust those worms. They're up to no good. They up to no good. They up to no good. Grand Central Station is one of the two great railroad termini that serve the Big Apple. There's an enchanting kind of old-fashioned charm to the place, a romantic aura that conjures up the ghost of ages past. When you walk across the polished stone floors and your eyes meet one glowing face of the rounded four-sided clock atop the central information booth, you can almost imagine turning the corner and running into William Powell waiting to meet Myrna Loy and sweep her away for drinks and torch songs at the Algonquin. Sometimes it feels as if the next train will discharge a swarm of 1940s GIs home on leave, ready to paint the town red, or a bevy of 1950s ladies who lunch, resplendent with white gloves, chic hats with dainty nose veils, high-heeled leather pumps, and seamed stockings. Unlike Pennsylvania Station, you can actually see daylight when you're in Grand Central. The high cathedral The high cathedral-like windows that open on the Vanderbilt Avenue let in slanting beams of sunshine that remind incoming commuters headed down into the subways that there really is an outside world, and they're not trapped in the bad remake of The Mole People. In one of the better moves of recent history, the powers that be decided to put Grand back into Grand Central Station. Accordingly, a massive clean-up, spruce-up, gentrify the living daylights out of it action was initiated. Financing was secured, contractors were hired, the cavernous ceiling was scoured with care, the schmutz of ages removed to reveal a radiant painted turquoise sky that was gemmed with gold-flecked representations of the constellation, wired to light up at dusk. This came as a surprise, nay, a shock, to everyone from the workers who made the discovery all the way up to the administrators who had the gentrification idea in the first place. One fellow compared the find to the prehistoric cave paintings of Altamira and the opening of King Tut's tomb. That's one of the beauties of New York City. No one really knows what they're going to find until they start looking. On the lower concourse of the station, a food court was installed, served by individual retail outlets purveying a multitude of cuisines and cosmetibles, Japanese and Indian, caviar and cookies, cheesecakes and chimichangas, with a clean, comfortable dining area with a plastic-covered tables displayed a faux collage of trinkets and travel memorabilia from the station's original heyday. A European-style grocery market provided a place where locals and commuters alike could purchase the maskings for meals for their own cooking, offering the freshest cheeses, meats, fish, produce, and pastries, and cakes so luscious that diet-conscious New Yorkers walked briskly past them to keep their eyes averted. Still, other stores displayed everything from paper goods to potpourri to peacoats. Step inside Grand Central Station these days, and you can get a train from Poughkeepsie, a magazine from Paris, olive oil from Tuscany, a necktie from Milan, and corned beef from Brooklyn. What you can't get is a locker to store your luggage. Not anymore, and everyone knows that. Too bad, but the world changes. So patrons are forced to schlep those heavy suitcases, wrestle themselves into a hernia with all those shopping bags. Look all you want. You won't find a locker, not even if your life depends on it. Not unless you know where to look. Not unless you also happen to know that the other name for the Grand Central Station is Grand Central Terminal. GCTQED. Kay knew all of this, and that's why he was able to lead Jay right to locker C18, somewhere inside Grand Central, but off the beaten path. Way off. Why are we? Jay tried to ask. Kay just held up the key and showed him the side of the 3 letters etched on it. You're not going to slow down on me now, are you, rookie? He jibbed. Slow you down? Jay's hackles rose. Whose brain's working on outdated software? Kay ignored Jay as if he hadn't said a thing. He took out some money and handed it to him, along with his suggestion, why don't you go grab us some coffee while I do this? Visions of how Kay used the exact same ploy to rid himself of the fawning presence of rookie Agent G sizzled in Jay's mind. He made a nice bit of business out of looking behind him casually and replying, Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were talking to Hop Singh. So Kay looked to the condescending senior agent act. Look, he said, eyes of flint. I don't know what's in there. I don't want you to get hurt, so move back. Jay didn't like being sheltered any more than he liked being talked down to. Before he became an MIB agent, he'd been a New York City policeman. His motto then had been to protect and serve, not to be coddled and protected. That hadn't changed. How far back? He demanded. Back around the coffee shop. Open the damn locker. He locked eyes with Kay. Kay had known Jay long enough to recognize when the younger agent had made his stand and wasn't about to back down from it. You couldn't outstubborn a mule. No sense wasting time trying. Not that he really expected Jay to go gentle into that coffee shop. Kay's reinstated memories told him that Jay was one of the best partners he'd ever had. Loyal, smart, and true. Not the kind to leave you without anyone to watch your back. Good to know the memories hadn't lied. He opened the locker. A typical train or bus station locker would comfortably hold a duffel bag, an attaché case, a small valise, even a clutch of shopping bags. Lockers have been used for more nefarious purposes, to hold more dangerous objects, which accounts for the present dearth of lockers in Grand Central Station. Jay was well aware of this. Whatever this locker held, the chances were about 50-50 that it could either end the mystery of the Light of Zartha or simply end the lives of Agents J and K. He knew the job was dangerous when he took it. He braced himself for the worst. While hoping that he was going to see a big brown bag from Bloomingdale's, the locker door swung open. It didn't hold a Bloomie's shopping bag. It held a world. From where he stood, Jay could see an incredibly small, utterly perfect miniature land. Peopled with minuscule aliens who were even now blinking and squinting up into the dazzling light that the opening of the locker door had sent pouring into their lives. The aliens were a furry, fuzzy, friendly-looking breed. Their golden eyes, large and saucer-shaped, seeming almost aglow with an inner light. They would have to allow the little creatures to dwell in the darkness of the closed luggage locker and find their way around without constantly bumping into everything. Maybe the delicate antennae atop their heads also served to help them navigate the darkness of their world. Maybe not. With aliens, Jay had learned that often there wasn't a good reason behind each and every weird aspect of their appearance. It was the same conclusion he'd reached back in the days when they'd still be willing to go out on blind dates. These locker-dwelling aliens mostly reminded him of something he'd seen once, up at the Bronx Zoo. Lemurs. Yeah, lemurs, that's what they look like, but only their faces. Their bodies were another story. These creatures stood upright. Memories of an old issue of National Geographic flashed through his mind. A photo spread of the meerkat family. The whole colony of weasel-like creatures standing tall on their hind legs, keeping a vigilant watch for predators approaching across the African desert. The locker dwellers didn't have any worries on that score. This was not the African desert, not by any means. A large, prosperous, bustling town occupied the foreground. But beyond it, Jay could see the whole landscape stretching back, all the way into the depths of the locker. Fascinated, he wanted to elbow Kay aside ever so gently, or not so gently. That bit about being sent for coffee still rankled, and get a better look. Or not so gently, the bit about being sent for coffee still rankled, and to get a better look. He didn't get the chance, not right away. Kay stepped directly in front of the open locker, letting the tiny aliens behold him, encircled by the golden light of Grand Central Station. And lo, a great shout went up from the multitude. Kay, he's back, the giver of life. All hail Kay, all hail Kay. Jay's lip curled. You the man who would be king of the train locker? He asked his partner. Kay didn't answer him right away. The life-giver was hearkening to the petitions of the most devout adherents. Did you bring us food, merciful Kay? They clamored, albeit respectfully. Kay frowned momentarily, then winged it. Retrieving a partially eaten Reese's peanut butter cup from a nearby trash can, he placed it in the center of the alien city, in the middle of their main street, so to speak. Joyous and grateful, the aliens danced and cavorted around the divine gift, making a gladsome noise. Merciful Kay, who brings abundance. All hail Kay. They think you're some kind of god, Jay observed. He didn't know whether to be amazed, amused, or disturbed by this revelation. On one hand, there were plenty of worse gods the aliens could choose. At least he was sure Kay would never ask them to go kill the inhabitants of Locker C-19 in his name. On the other hand, Kay, a god, in those shoes? Nah, Kay demurred, dismissing Jay's notions of his divinity out of his hand, while the little aliens continued to chant praises of his name. More like the Pope. Having set Jay's mind at rest, Kay summoned the attention of the faithful. Good and gentle townsfolk of Locker C-18, he said. The chanting stopped. They harked into the words of his voice. Did I leave something with you for safekeeping? One alien stepped forward to act as spokesman for the rest. Yes, the timekeeper. You left it to illuminate our streets and our hearts. He gestured to a clock tower that dominated the town. At the top rested an old watch, a pulsar model straight out of the 1970s, complete with glowing digital display. Ah. The masked aliens breathed in reverent wonder as they gazed upward, for the shining miracle in their midst did not grow old, nor did the marvel of its presence become commonplace with the passage of years, Plainly, their love for the timekeeper was nearly as profound as their love for the giver of the timekeeper. The giver gaveth, now the giver tooketh away. It's been known to happen. Been looking everywhere for that watch, Kay said, reaching into the locker and removing it from its resting place atop the tower. The chorus of horrified protests rose up from the uncounted alien throats. But, merciful one, the clock tower! No! No! Here, Jay said. He took off his own watch and installed it in the clock tower in place of Kay's old pulsar. Now you've got something with a little style, he told him. Titanium case, alarm, waterproof to 300 meters. Like Miami in there now. The spokes alien dared to raise his eyes to this new merciful one and ask, Who are you, stranger? Jay. At once, the jubilant cry went up. All hail Jay! All hail Jay! All hail Jay! Jay smiled. He could get used to this. He gave the aliens a little wave, the kind Queen Elizabeth II of England had made famous. Feeling pleased with himself, he began to close the locker. Wait, came a sonorous voice from the depths. The commandments. Jay stopped. Impossible. No way they could have Charlton Heston in there. Then again. The tablet, the spokes alien cried, and his words were taken up by the multitude who echoed, The tablet! The tablet! The tablet! The same resonant voice that had bid Jay cease and desist now spoke again, making things all clear. We have lived by its words, and peace has reigned throughout our world. J and K peered into the innermost recesses of the locker, seeking the source of those stirring tones. They gazed beyond the center of town, beyond the town itself, past the outlying districts, over fields and roads, until their eyes beheld a great mountain. Upon the peak thereof stood an elder of the same diminutive alien race. He was garbed in dignity, piety, and a long flowing robe. Upon his face was wisdom, plus a generate beard of blinding whiteness, and in his hand he held the tablet. Holding it out before him, he offered it to Kay. Pass it on to others, he said, that they too may be enlightened. Carefully, Kay extended his arm into the locker, reaching for the outstretched tablet. When his finger touched the revered object, the crowd of aliens raised a mighty cheer. Extracting his hand, Kay studied what the elder alien had given him, with Jay leaning in at his shoulder. What was this awesome artifact, this focus of worship? What deep moral truths might it contain, to have succeeded in bringing peace and prosperity to an entire world, no matter what the world's size might be, relative to our own? What was this sacred relic the alien's most honored elder has vouchsafed onto Kay? A rental card from Tapeworm Video? Jay was speechless. So was Kay, but that was because he was examining both sides of the alien elder's bequest. It was indeed a rental card from Tapeworm Video, and one with his name on it. In addition, it was printed with the store's policies, special offers, and rules for proper stewardship of all rented tapes. These the alien began reciting piously, in unison, while from the mountaintop, the robed and bearded elder elicited the teachings, so all might grasp their meaning to the fullest. Be kind. Rewind. Go back and reconcile your past in order to move tranquilly into the future. 2 for 1. Every Wednesday. Give twice as much as ye receive on the most sacred of days, every Wednesday. Large adult entertainment section in the back. At this point, the elder whipped out his arm and pointed dramatically to the shadowed regions of the locker, even further back than his mountains. The congregation of tiny aliens burst into deafening for them cheers and began to march whither the hand of the elder directed. They seemed in a hurry to follow the bidding of the tablet. It made a man stop to think. What do they have back there? Jay wondered. Then, No, never mind. There are some things humankind wasn't meant to know. Close the door, he told Kay. They're headed for the back. They're headed for the back. As they left the secured locker behind and emerged into one of the more popularly traveled parts of Grand Central Station, Jay asked, "So, what's up with the video card?" "Don't know," Kay said, still eyeing it. "Why did you leave the watch with them?" "To remind me." "Why did you leave the watch with them?" "To remind me." "Of what?" Jay persisted. Getting information out of Kay was like milking a turtle. "Don't remember." "Take a wild guess," Jay snapped. "Okay." Jay might be a little out of temper, but Kay was still the indisputable master of cool. He held out the digital watch he retrieved from the clock tower so that his partner could see the winking display. 59:37. And as they watched, the seconds were counting down. 36. 35. 34. 33. 32. 31. "I'm guessing that's how long we've got to figure it all out," Kay said. It wasn't a whole hell of a long time, but he didn't say a word about that. No need to state the obvious. If it had him worried, he didn't show it. That was Kay, all the way through. Lowering the watch, he gave the card from Tapeworm Video another look. Let's see if they're still open for business. Whew. Yeah, buddy. Did a good amount there today. We're on chapter 15, my friends. And I think that's a good stopping point. We are got about a quarter left. This bad boy book. We may finish it next week. Maybe 2 weeks. We'll see. But got one coming up for Christmas that I'm excited about. Can't tell you about it. Just gonna have to wait. It's gonna be awesome. We're gonna have a lot of fun with this. It's gonna be a great Christmas time book. Oh, I wanted to say, last week was a little bit of a disaster, but I'm glad this week worked out okay. And we're gonna be coming back next Sunday. But I'm thinking about starting something and doing something on Wednesdays also. A mini little book thing, reading like one of them little tiny books back there in the back. Thinking about starting that about 8 o'clock. So if you want to join that, do it. If not, whatever. Hey. Thank you for checking out my live stream. This book was fun. It's continuing to be fun. We're coming up on the thrilling conclusion of Men in Black 2. I wonder if the movie's any good. Love you guys. Thank you so much for the help. We will see you next week.